So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Avalon Rising afternoon, and we are privileged to have Jonathan Cainer with us, who's been supporting Sunrise since its inception, and also other great festivals like the Big Green. And he's here to share his thoughts and views on what's happening with astrology right now. So please give it up for Jonathan Cainer.
Are you sitting comfortably? Well, then I'll begin. Actually, do you know what? I'll begin. I'll do what I often do, and I'll begin with just a moment's silence, a little meditation. So let's all just go inside ourselves and be still for a second, and then, if I don't fall asleep, I'll be back shortly to talk to you. Well, that could be a moment's silence for Brian, who this time last year would have been here with his camera, and everywhere with his camera, actually, and who he dedicated a section of the field to in his memory. And it's funny how we associate silence with, like, something of respect for people who aren't here anymore. Because actually it's also a moment of respect for ourselves and for being here. And it's yet the one thing we don't do. We don't go silent very often, particularly not round here in a field like this. And what might be good would be if a few people on this side could move forward a little bit. Maybe just if you could move forward on this side a bit, so we get a bit of ability to come to the door to sort of join in. Otherwise they will hover, because that's the suggestion. If anyone wants to come over here, that's also a great idea. Let's create a bit of space. I mean, obviously, the same applies for if you want to leave at any point. You might just want to get up and go. I sort of have and I haven't prepared what I want to say. I mean, to some extent, I think the issues will arise, and in any event, at some point, I'll throw it open to questions, and what I haven't covered, we can cover then. I know I want to talk about 2012. I know that's an important thing to talk about because it's coming soon, and there's a whole industry has built itself around 2012, and I worry for its future. Who said that? Who said there'll be another one? You'll make a good astrologer. Because, of course, there will be another. They're like buses, these end-of-the-world things, you know. I remember, I'll never forget 1999 and all the fuss that was being made, and that wasn't my first one. Of course, there was old Harold Camping back in 1984. He had one going, and he's revised that. It's now till October the 21st this year. So if you want a religious end of the world, you don't have to wait as long. It's funny, what is this with the 21st thing as well, you know? Harold Camping thinks October 21st, and the Mayan calendar runs out on December 21st next year, and perhaps 21's a sort of, I don't know, an unlucky number. But it doesn't have much to do, well, yeah, let's tackle that. What does it have to do with astrology? 2012 is important, partly because so many people have pinned so much on it, partly because actually I do think that having this, you know, we're not exactly a mainstream situation, which is why I dress like this. Let's do that. I wanted to dress with authority. I thought, I'm going to wear the clothes of authority. And actually, again, can we do that moving forward trick a little bit? Would that be all right? Because there's more people at the door who'd like to come in if they possibly could. I thought, well, you know, I'd like to be clear about 2012, and it's this funny, it's this badge of authority thing, this how you dress, this how things appear. Come in, take a seat. You could even wander through boldly and be quite all right. Nobody would mind as long as you don't actually sit on their toes. You just feel free to make yourself at home. And well, so what is it astrologically? Astrologically, there's a lot going on, somewhat more than usual. We've had a set of very powerful planetary alignments that have shaken the world a little bit, one way or another, and they've fed lots of fears and lots of paranoias. They've also fed lots of hopes. So on the one hand, we've got a world out there who are absolutely now convinced that nothing but financial doom and gloom awaits us, and that we'll never escape the Great Depression which we are allegedly being thrown into. And yet on the other hand, there's this whole Arab Spring thing happening, which potentially is most inspiring, and speaks of people reaching a point in the evolution of their collective consciousness where they want to change something about what they will accept or not accept as a society, as a group. And one of the things is that authority within a society is conferred by various different things, and this is one of them, which is why I've not worn a tie since I went to school, and even then I used to bunk off rather than wear it. But I thought, I'll stick it on for sunrise, and to say something about this whole kind of funny thing about where authority comes from and what we convey authority to. I mean, we don't. None of us. I'm the only tie in the room. Have you? Okay, snap. Okay, good. So, astrologically, in terms of planets aligning and their influence, we've got a Uranus-Pluto square happening at the moment, which is forming a wide square to Saturn. Are there any astrologers in here? Well, I can say what I like and get away with it. Oh, no, hang on. It is, isn't it? It's in the wide square, the wide opposition to... It's like a little kind of T-square in the sky, but it's stretching itself a bit now. Stretching thing, but the Uranus-Pluto is still to culminate, and that's kicks. There are these things happening that are sort of making people all the time draw breath and go, oh my goodness, what kind of a world are we living in? I mean, it's always been that way. But, I know what I wanted to say, let's get it in the right order. The thing about end of the world stuff, the thing about, oh, it's the end of the Mayan calendar, oh, Nostradamus says we won't get past 1999, oh, Harold Camping says we won't get past 1984, whoops, we won't get past May 2011, oh no, now it's going to be October, is that to some extent, the more of that we allow to be fed into ourselves and into the world, the more we stunt our own growth. Because, you know, somebody did some very interesting research about astrology. It was one of the first things I learned when I was studying astrology years ago. And they explained how they did a psychological test, and they asked people to tick boxes about what they were like as personalities. And one of the questions thrown into this random questionnaire was, and do you know your zodiac sign? And do you know what your zodiac sign is supposed to be like? And those people who knew their zodiac sign and knew what their zodiac sign was supposed to be like, inevitably ticked more of the qualities which associated them with their zodiac sign, so the Geminis were more likely to say, yes, I'm talkative, and yes, I like business, and yes, I have interest in many things, and yes, I'm moody, or whatever it might be, that those cliches were that they'd been fed. It didn't matter whether they took astrology seriously or whether they believed in it. It filters in sideways. You hear it anyway. You say, I'm not into this, but you kind of, before you know it, you've made more of an investment in it than you realise. And I suppose, in a similar way, we make more of an investment than we realise in the idea that there's this thing, of course the world ain't going to end next year, but what if it does? And it sort of gets to you. So even if you think it's not getting to you, it gets to you. So then long-term planning becomes dodgy. It becomes a sort of, well, perhaps there's no point. Why should I I met someone only the other day, and they had a kid, and they were really having a happy time. She was quite sure that the world wouldn't carry on much further, and she might have brought a kid into the world for no good reason, because it would all end soon anyway. And that consciousness that feeling that it's not going to last, that it's unsustainable, is actually a very bad thing to have in our heads. I mean, I'm all for sustainability, but at the same time, I think this idea that everything is unsustainable is true and it's not true. That which is not sustainable will will take care of itself. One way or another, it will fade and something else will blossom. But planet Earth is sustainable, and human life is sustainable, and the evolution of human consciousness is very sustainable. That's what's exciting. We are growing wiser, and we are growing more alert and more aware and more able to see ourselves for who we are and what we are. And that's terribly exciting. And collectively we're doing it as well as individually. And to some extent societies are defined by they're defined by how they see themselves and what their relationship to the universe is, by their cosmologies, by their perception of what gods are shaping their fortunes and what powers are influencing their worlds. And this is still a very new thing. It's as new as blooming mobile phones almost. This business of, we might actually have the power to shape our own destinies. We really don't have to eat what the people in the ties have told us. We don't have to buy into any of that stuff. It's been a bit fringe for a while. I'm not saying like we're the first generation who've ever discovered it, but it's gaining currency in what they call the mainstream too. And so this idea that we can grow together into an organism that works collectively to choose positives over negatives is a very good thing, although you have to be careful with positives over negatives. Because, of course, one of the things about that is that, like in Glastonbury, they have light workers. And I'm always a bit suspicious, because I've never met a dark worker. And you wonder what they call themselves anyway, So just to be cautious, because we know positive is what I believe to be right and good. Do feel free, come in, make yourself comfortable, just tread over all those, and it's all right. We've got insurance, so it's okay. Feel free, make yourself comfy, or you can snuggle in at the back there if you like. So there's this astrological stuff that's going on. There's this Pluto-Uranus square, which is definitely... and Pluto is all about fear. Pluto was only discovered in 1931, and I personally take the line very strongly that a planet is only relevant from the moment that it comes into our consciousness, because I believe that planets affect our consciousness. So it might have been there, and I'm sure it was there for thousands and thousands of years, but we didn't know it was there, and therefore our relationship with it really didn't matter unless you're going into some incredibly complicated esoteric level of the sort that they work with in the yurts back there. I mean, I dare say they know all about that sort of thing. But generally, no, Pluto was there. It came into the mass public consciousness in 1930, I think it was, when they discovered it. And, of course, it influenced the world tremendously, the discovery of this new planet, because all of a sudden we had, Mickey Mouse's dog. They named that after it. And they named plutonium after it, which is a bit darker, really, than Mickey Mouse's dog. On balance, of the two. Give it a straight choice. I'd rather have Pluto than this dark and terrifying force which allows us all, for the first time humanity has it within its power to rip itself to shreds. We can destroy the entire Earth, not just the neighbouring village, not just a big strong army to take over a continent. No, we'll have everybody in one. I'll shoot mine and you'll shoot yours. And I grew up under that shadow, well, like you didn't. We all grew up under that shadow of, well, again, what's the point? Because it's only a matter of time before America fire theirs and Russia fire theirs, and we are all wiped out, forgotten, living in some kind of steampunk wasteland, I suppose, if we're living at all, and or a Neil Gaiman inspired, sort of scenario of, and maybe, but actually maybe not too. Maybe it's not going to end that way. Maybe it's just that we've got this stuff hanging over us, this kind of doom and gloom and if it doesn't come through in the prophecies of Nostradamus, it comes through in the general expectation that there isn't much point, that it isn't going to last very long. It's all falling apart anyway. We're all doomed. It's all stuffed. We're all stupid, and the future's bleak. Which is why I joined the Daily Mail, really. I thought, when I first went to them, I was dressed a little more colourfully than this. I was in my sunrise regalia when I went to the Daily Mail. I did have shoes on, though, because I thought, out of respect, I'd wear some shoes. And I didn't have that much more hair, but I had a bit, back in the early 90s. And anyway, they said to me that the message came back, the editor likes everything about you, but the way you dress. And I thought, well, all right. So if you like everything else about me and you're not going to change anything else about me, the way I dress I can deal with, and they actually put a contract, in a clause in my contract saying, they call it the suit clause, that I have to dress in a way that represents the Daily Mail at all times when I'm in public. And for the last, since I joined, I suppose, what's that I'm getting on, given that awkward little gap in the middle when I went wandering to the Mirror and the Express, that'll be knocking on 20 years now I've been Daily Mailing. And for 20 years I've refused, steadfast, to wear a suit or a tie. I did go and buy a suit for the second interview, for the one where we had to discuss the terms. And after that I never did again. And I pushed it as far as I could. And I suddenly thought, no, but the point was, yeah, I'll take the Daily Mail, because the Daily Mail are very good. I know they're very good at putting people's backs up. And, I've encountered that here on these fields before now, and I understand that completely. They pick targets and they recognise what it is that winds people up and gets them going, what kind of a bloody world is this? And they're really good at it. And they actually said to me once, in a moment of unguarded weakness, they said, every day after we've published the Mail, we sit down and look at it to see what was wrong and what we could improve for the next day. And we count the number of pages that contain a what kind of a world is this kind of a moment. And if we haven't got enough, we try and pepper a few more in for the next day so that people remain agitated and irritated and aggravated and generally, uncomfortable. And you get to me at the end, finally, and I'm there at the back going, well, actually, it's not such a bad world after all. It's all right, really. In fact, as we know, if it's in the newspaper, that's because it's rare and unusual. The majority of people on the planet and the majority of things happening on the planet aren't actually that bad. But our own capacity to create a darkness and actually to select an enemy is what we have to be watching out for. It's when we say, no, the Daily Mail, and it's their fault and they're dictating and shaping the negativity in society, or it's these people or those politicians or, this company who are producing this poison and putting it out and genetically modifying that. And, actually there is only one enemy of anyone anywhere on the planet, really, and that's unconsciousness. That's not being aware, not being sensitive to that whole journey that we're taking, each one of us as individuals, towards where we're going and what we're doing. Could you move forward a little bit on this? I'm so sorry, I'll keep shuffling you forward till eventually you'll merge with the whiteboard, but I can see a few people here who might want to come in, and now they're embarrassed in case they don't. No, we didn't want to come in anyway, we're just looking through the door. We were just wondering, actually there's a band playing we want to see, but if you wanted to come in, you could, and if you wanted to leave again, I wouldn't hold it against you. But you could just feel free, and there's a spot over here, I think, where maybe if we could just pull up a little bit. That's the stuff, just make yourselves comfortable. I've no idea how much longer I'm going on for anyway, or indeed how long I've been talking, or what on earth I've said. But then it is Sunday at sunrise, and I rather suspect you haven't got much more of an idea than I have. Oh, where were we? So, yes. Oh, the Daily Mail, the end of the world. The end of the world. Is it the end of the world? We know the end of the world is coming. But actually, one thing which I think, we're going to have to call it something else after 2012, because it's definitely, 2013 is going to come, and we're all going to be, and what are they going to put on the talks board? And what's Mark going to do? Mark Healy? Yeah, well, there he is. What are you going to do in 2013? What are you going to talk about?
We'll come to my talk after this one.
Oh, all right. And it's very good for business. That's the other thing. I mean, I'm sorry, but it is, that sort of. And it doesn't matter how many times you say, no, look, it's a consciousness change. It's a shift in awareness that's coming. It's not actually the end of the world. Because one person said it once. It's out there, and people feel it. And we have this kind of strange magnetic attraction to doom and gloom and worry and concern. And so we can't resist it. It's there, and therefore it drives the traffic through. It's a wonderful thing. But it's not. It isn't really ideal for us collectively as individuals. Us and them isn't very good for us, and light and dark isn't very good for us. Certainly not drawing those distinctions. The process we ought to be on, it should be just one of, now what am I learning? I try very hard not to have opinions, and every so often, one slips in. And I suddenly realise I've got a strong opinion. I had one the other morning about breakfast cereals. I didn't like the brand of breakfast cereal I was eating. It just didn't taste as good as my usual one. And I thought, well, is this an opinion? Yes, it is. Is it harming me? Well, yeah. Because if I had less of an opinion, I could enjoy the breakfast cereal I'm actually eating. I don't know. Obviously you can take that too far. But there is that spiritual idea that if you accept what's come into your life as a gift and see the magic within it, it's a better way for going through life. And, maybe you can get to a point where you can take that too far. But there is the lovely story of a wandering Indian monk who, I use this every so often in my horoscope, so stop me if you, actually don't stop me if you've heard it. I'll just get to the end of it quickly. But, there's the wandering Indian monk, and he's been starving, and he's been sort of sitting under a tree for days, and a local villager comes out and gives him a crust of bread and a drink, and then a dog races out and grabs the bread out of his hand, and he goes running after the dog, saying, Thank you, Krishna, because he sees the dog as the embodiment of Krishna, and he sees the action as the embodiment Master, and he's thank you Krishna, but please let me offer you some butter to go with it. And that feeling that you can take even what's dark, what's not so great, and see the blessing and the gift within it. And it's a nice idea to aspire to. Little trickier when something's hit you right over the head and it's been horrible. And one of the things I get asked a lot is, well, you say very positive things, but don't you recognise, Jonathan, that hold on a minute, are we adults here? Mainly. Any kids? Cover her ears. Cover her ear. There we go. So don't you recognise that shit happens, Okay, you can uncover. But, and of course, yeah, I do. I know it happens. That's all the more reason to be positive, Oh, right, stuff happens, therefore let's give up, Therefore, that just proves we're wasting our time. So, the end of the world and astrology. Yes. Then there is something really, because of course, obviously, there's the Mayan stuff which comes to a head next year. But there's something else that comes to a head next year, which is very beautiful and rather wonderful. It's a 243-year cycle split into what I think is 123-year. That can't be right, and 105-year divisions. But anyway, it is the transit of Venus, which comes on the 6th of June next year, which will be shortly after next year's sunrise or before, depending on whether we decide to go for the Glastonbury Gap. But that's a sunrise issue, not an astrology issue. But whenever it is, the transit of Venus is when Venus effectively does what we had a lunar eclipse, we had a solar eclipse the other day. We got a lunar eclipse on the 15th, and when the moon effectively blots out our view of the sun by going in front of it, that's a solar eclipse. And it only happens when the planets align in 3 dimensions. So the sun and the moon are in the same part of the zodiac once a month, but it's only once or twice a year that they actually get to the point where the one blots out the light of the other, and you've got to be in the right place to see it, otherwise you don't get the effect. Well, with Venus, that only happens once every 100 and blah 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 years, but they come in pairs, 8 years apart. We had one in 2004, and I saw it, and it was stunning. I saw it. Did anyone else see it? Yeah, it was gorgeous. Wasn't it gorgeous? Do you want to come in? Feel free. I mean, there's nice people at the door will squidge over for you if you ask them nicely. And you can leave again any time you like. Don't tell them about the bit where we actually tie you to the floor till they've sat down. Feel free to come along in. And I'm so sorry but maybe even at the back this time you could move back a little bit or around and let them in. And here we go. That's so. So yes, Venus and the transit of Venus, and now what's that about? What does that symbolise? Well, to me, it's very clear. Well, I would take this line, wouldn't I? You know, Venus is the planet of love. It's the planet of all things that are about the most sensitive, the most treasured, the most magical, the most creative, the most inspiring force. And that's pretty much universal. I mean, actually, not entirely universal. The Mayans had a bit of a different view on what Venus was and who Venus was. And that might in turn tie in with their thinking of why they're not, they had a different take on 2012. But generally, in most societies and even in most cosmologies and most astrologies, Venus is generally considered a pretty positive force, not least because it's so bright. It's the one you see, almost always, it's the one you see just after the sun goes down, the first bright star of the night. It is the twinkle, twinkle, little star that they sang the song to. Every so often, Venus and Jupiter do this kind of interesting little swapsy, because Jupiter can also be very bright, and Venus can become a morning star, so it isn't invariably Venus that you do see at night, but most of the time it is. And Venus is most definitely a very positive force. So, here it is, revealing itself to us. You know, it goes in front of the sun, it only makes a tiny little dot as it travels across, but that's a real potentially lovely way of interpreting, and that is, after all, at the essence of what an astrologer does, is to interpret the alignments in the sky. We look at what's happening and we say, oh, that looks like that, or that makes me feel like this, or that puts me in mind of this, and from that we take the old inference of as above, so below. So Venus being unveiled, being highlighted, being suddenly beautifully shown up in all its glory in the middle of the day, and we say, this is Venus working outside its usual zone of potential, this is Venus being revealed to us, this is us seeing its workings, and this is us recognising more about what the love in us might be capable of doing. If we were to be somehow freer with the love, freer with the creativity, freer with the inspiration, more likely to reach for positive solutions to problems which have been taxing us for ages instead of being defeated by them, what might we do? It's very definitely a collective message, and of course that means, the only way it could be collective is if it's hitting every individual. So regardless of what sign you are, June 2012 has to be a good month. It's going to be really tricky for me, because you're going to have to find 12 different ways of saying you've got a good month coming, But it's good it's more than 12 different ways, isn't it? It's what's good for us is good in a lot of different ways. But in terms of that possibility of feeling almost overwhelmed by the very same love that the creation has for the creator, whatever put us here, whatever keeps us breathing, whatever makes us alive, whatever gives us our place on this planet, it's not. There are times when you think, oh my goodness me, I've come, if heaven is a place on earth, so must be hell. I've seen people going through it, and actually they put themselves through it sometimes. And you can see, that bit in The Last Battle by C.S. Lewis, where they're waiting to. They're all waiting to go into this wonderful land, and everybody's seeing this fantastic feast on the table, apart from some people who can't see it and won't see it, and all they can see is that there's something really foul and vile, that the food isn't edible, and that everything that's happening to them is wrong. So, what was I saying? Oh, I know, because you can always turn away from the idea that something is wonderful and positive and full of great possibility, but at the same time, if you're ready to embrace it, it seems fairly reasonable to me to assume that to assume that whatever is keeping us alive and putting us on this planet is a very positive and a very benign force, that there's only our very best interests at heart, and our best interests. Well, actually, suffering is never in our best interests. Being happy is in our best interests. Enjoying life is in our best interests. Feeling like we can celebrate is in our best interests. And feeling like we don't have to be afraid. We don't need any of the rest of it. We really don't. And the universe doesn't want us to have it. And that has profound implications for peak oil. Because that's another one that is thrown around. Have we had a peak oil conversation here this weekend? I don't know. We usually get one. There's usually somebody tells us about peak oil and what that means for the future. And generally what peak oil means is, it's another way of saying we're all stuffed. Because there are various variations and permutations on this theme. And peak oil says, well, the world has already produced, or is about to have produced, more oil than we can ever get, and yet our needs are going up and our supplies are going down, and therefore it's only a matter of time before we're all going to start turning into savages and beating each other's doors down. And if you haven't got enough tins of baked beans in your cupboard now, and if you haven't got some way of cooking them when the oil runs out, you better have a tree in your garden. You better be chopping it down now and drying out the firewood. You'd better have your guns ready to shoot your neighbours. You better, you're right back to your Harold Camping again. In fact, that's what peak oil is. It's Harold Camping's, rapture all over again in a different hat. But it works on the assumption that somewhere along the line, either God is stupid or God hates us. I'm not so sure that either are true. I rather think God's within us and it loves us and we love it and it's all okay, And that's the other wonderful, gobsmacking, amazing thing that we in the West, by and large, and now I'm talking outside this tent, I'm talking mainstream, we don't believe in God in the way we used to believe in God. The estate agents have lost their currency. The spiritual middlemen, the churches, don't stand between us and our own spiritual experience like what they used to do. And that's been the most wonderful evolution that in my lifetime. I've seen this sort of terror and respect for the church turn into a kind of, whatever. That's great. Wow. Before our very eyes there has been change, and I think that has to be considered positive change. Sorry, Cliff Richard. But, so now this Arab Spring thing, a part of me wants to think that they might be at the point where suddenly there's a questioning there, because of course there has been this great sense of one part of the world getting further and further away from the religious oppressor, which has kept it in check, and the other part apparently falling ever more in line. But I'm not so sure that's really true. I think a great deal of how you perceive the world to be controlled or run is down to who's got the microphone and who's wearing the tie. And I rather think that even in the parts of the world which we've traditionally assumed to be completely under the grip of a fundamentalism which will never drop, I think we could see a loosening of that too. I'm incredibly excited about a post-2012 world. And actually, I'm incredibly excited about a world on the way there too. I want to see the whole thing. So I wanted to talk about 2012, and I think I've covered that. We've done the end of the world to death. Or maybe not. Maybe someone... And I don't know, but it might be question time. And if it was, do we have a radio mic? Or do we have anyone here who might know where a radio mic is? A handheld would do. A handheld on a long lead. Oh, that one, okay. Would you be kind enough to test it? Is it plugged in and ready to rumble?
There might be a switch on the mic.
Do you want to wait until we got a mic? Tell you what, while we're looking for see if we can get that thing going, there's a gentleman here would like to ask me a question. I'll give you the mic, then you can give it back to me.
Thanks. I'm interested in that planet called Elon. Is it? What's it called? Elenin. Yeah. Can you talk about that?
Tell me about Comet Elenin, Tim.
It's basically it's a 1 2 1 2 1 2. It's a Some people are saying, it's like that film Battle for Los Angeles. That the earthquakes that happened in when its path was nearest to Earth, and there's one more coming up when it's going to be nearer than it was when it happened in the Japanese one happened. So from that, they're predicting a massive earthquake. October 21st.
Sorry,
Could most
I think your mic's been turned.
my mic's now gone.
Is that one up? Is that up?
That's one.
One,
and
two,
now
one,
this
two,
one's
one, two.
back two.
There we go.
Okay. Hello, hello, hello. So, did most of you catch that? There's something about an intelligent comet. I mean, in one way, I'd be the last person to suggest. Can you hear me okay? All right then. Hello, hello. Oh, can you hear me okay now? Any better? Okay. So, in one way, if this is about, there's an intelligent comet apparently on its way, a comet that's been seen to show signs of intelligence. And on the one hand, I would be the last person to dismiss the idea of intelligence in a celestial being, and particularly not with my mate Greg giving a talk any moment now in the tent just round the corner on the topic of the idea that the sun itself is an intelligent being, which is a fascinating concept and one which makes all the sense in the world to me. If planet Earth, I think we know about the Gaia theory. Do we? Do we know about the whole Gaia? Anybody not? Anybody won't? Okay, one or two. Very briefly, it's very simple. It's the idea that planet Earth is one living organism, one tree, if you like, and we are all individual leaves on that tree. And we think we're separate, and we think we're our own selves, but actually we're totally linked to each other and to every other aspect of the tree and to the roots. And we've got this individual sense of, yes, but I'm not the rest of the tree. Well, no, you are. Because, think about it, you're as connected to planet Earth as the leaves of the tree are to the branch of the tree. We're all part of one thing. And that Mother Earth or planet Earth or nature is one cosmic and intelligent being of which we form many aspects. And therefore, this collective unconsciousness that I keep talking about, the collective subconscious, the idea that between us as how we think as individuals and how we think collectively as groups, it's phenomenally important to an astrologer to study because it gives you an insight into what the planet itself might be thinking. So I'm all in favour of that. And if planet Earth is an intelligent cosmic being in its own right, why shouldn't the sun be? Why on earth shouldn't the sun be? And why shouldn't actually all the planets be dancing around it, following a form of higher intelligence that is in its own way as aware and as understanding as you are and I are? And certainly, the old joke about let's hope there's intelligent life in space because there's not very much of it around here, would make some sense. So if this comet's intelligent, I don't think that's necessarily anything to be concerned about. I mean, the idea is it isn't a comet, it's actually an enormous vehicle. It's a sort of charabanc from Alpha Centauri. They're set out on the alien equivalent of a day trip, and they're heading our way. And we better have the rocks and the Kiss Me Quick hats ready for them. I don't know. There's also, so there's Comet Elenin, and there's Nibiru as well, isn't there? The additional planet that's going to appear and present itself, and it's going to have it comes every 3,600 years, and it's going to contain such weight and such power that it will effectively shake the Earth's orbit and will go off on our different tilt and will, You know, the doomsday scenarios are flooding in thick and fast at every turn. And all I can say is Comet Elenin is not on my radar, as I'm, otherwise I wouldn't have. It's what? It's in Leo, is it? Well, there you go. It's getting plenty of leonine attention. I don't know enough. I'll come to you in a minute. I don't know enough about. I do know this much. I know that comets come, and that people make a great fuss of them, and it's very rare that you get one that even makes a bit of an impact. The last one we had was the year Princess Diana died. The last one that really was so visible that people all over the globe were going, wow. You know, they saw it night after night. And that's what they generally tend to be connected with, is the death of kings and queens and, changes in regimes. But I have yet to see any reason to see Elenin as a negative force. I don't know anything more about it than that. Certainly my astronomical updates haven't told me much about it. So if it's been spotted, it's mainstream science has yet to give as much news on it. So unless they're suppressing it for part of a conspiracy, I'm inclined to relax. Go ahead. Did you have? Could we pass you the microphone? I mean, obviously it is a charabanc full of aliens, and it'd be quite fun. I bet they'd like it here. Can we hear you? How the journey from here to 2012 is going to pay out. Play out or pay out? I think it's going to pay out, actually. In terms of what? Oh, yeah, the quickening. Is that what you mean? Where are you from? Which part of England are you from? Okay, so the quickening has now reached North London. It's making its way slowly up the southeast. I know in Brighton is suffering from the quickening at the moment. South Wales as well, eh? It's funny, it's little pockets in communities around the country where, people are leading their lives at this really, sort of, they're getting from cradle to grave in the time it takes to have your breakfast, blink and you miss it. No, you're the sensitive radar, the early warning system for the rest of us. I mean, this quickening thing is a really fascinating thing. And of course, for every wonderful cosmic miracle in the world, there is a kind of tedious grown-up explanation that squashes the whole thing. So, for every time Uri bends a spoon, there's somebody who can tell you that it's a sleight of hand trick that any magician can do. Is the only one with what? He is. He is the only one with a car full of bent spoons. We astrologers have got an answer for everything. Science hasn't got an answer for everything. Therefore, we can trust science. I think was what George was saying. Yeah, and Brian Cox said it. Oh, we can really trust it then. I'm coming back to the quickening because I don't want to get. And the contrast. The reason I was wandering to science is because, of course, the normal explanation that you give is that there is a quickening that happens naturally in all our lives as we grow older. Oh my goodness me, I can see Christmas from here. And when I was a kid, I could never see Christmas from June. It just wasn't possible. But that was because I couldn't see Christmas, couldn't see next week, couldn't see tomorrow. The younger you are, the more you naturally tend to live in the here and now. And also, the less of your life you've lived so far, if you see what I mean. So that now I've lived more than half my life. I've had a good chunk of my allotted span. It's all used up, and we'll talk about what I did with it later, some other time. But, you know, for better or for worse, it's gone. So I go, all right, this great merry-go-round of planet Earth, it's a waltzer. I'll come back to you, you know, but it's like a waltzer. You know, at the fairground, and look, the Earth itself is spinning as it turns round and round the sun, and that's what a waltzer does, doesn't it? It goes round and round, and then the individual little cars. No wonder we all feel sick, you know. No wonder we wake up every morning feeling a little bit dodgy. What kind of a world are we living in? Oh, I will come back to the rest of your question, but now thank you so much for that, because that's the other thing about 2012 that I completely forgot to say. It's really important. Okay, so the planet is spinning, and then it's going around and around the sun. Well, it's an elliptical orbit, but we'll just, for the sake of argument, it's going round and round. Meanwhile, the sun itself is going in circles, much, much slower circles, around a point in the Milky Way that they call the galactic center. So the whole thing is a spin within a spin within a spin. And if you give that distant point in the Milky Way, the pivotal point of the entire galaxy, an astrological positioning, which means you have to do a slight bit of maths and a twiddle with the slide rule, because it isn't exactly where you'd want it to be, but you can make it there with a bit of a squint, then the place you get is, roughly speaking, 26 degrees. No, it's not. It's up now. It's 29 degrees Sagittarius, because it shifts over time. So it's just about the very last day of Sagittarius, which is about the 21st of December, which is when, you know, the Mayan calendar runs out, and then people have got terribly excited and said, look, that's the day when we and the sun and our whole enterprise, that we know, the whole, yes, the planet Enterprise, it is. We are on the Starship Enterprise. This is our starship. It's going round and round in circles. The view from our spaceship window is the thing we see in the sky each night, and then we pass on that night, we go through the part of the universe that aligns directly with the center of the galaxy, and that's why it's all going to shift, and that's why Christmas 2012's, don't bother with buying your presents, because whatever it is you think somebody wants, when they wake up on Christmas morning, they'll realise their ambitions and goals and dreams are totally different. Oh, that's just what I used to want. Don't go shopping till the 22nd, folks, or you get them the wrong thing. Anyway, yes it is, and yes we will, but at the same time, you know, it's not quite that simple. Every Christmas for the last few years has had us aligned with it as close to jazz as anything. It's not like for the first time ever we'll align with it on that day. It's a much slower process. It is something that's happening right now, but it's happening over years or decades, and to suddenly pin it to 2012 is a bit dodgy if you do the math. Now, the quickening. So on the one hand, there's our own natural process that we all go through as we realise we can see further into the future. On the other hand, I've definitely seen people on their individual journeys going through processes, emotional processes, psychological processes, times when you did go through some difficulty in a relationship, or some big issue with your finances, or some point of confusion in your life, and what might normally be a process that would take years to go through is happening in weeks, sometimes months, and occasionally days. And that is something that I've noticed people talking about more. It's a little bit more than, oh, don't time fly, it's sort of, there's more than that going on. As for what it means, I don't know. I think it means we're waking up, we're noticing more about our processes, and I'd like to think the long-term aspect of that is a long-term vision of the future. It's all part of us shedding a short-termism which we've all tended to subscribe to, partly through these fears of the end of the world coming our way, partly because of the of what we've heard prophesied and spoken about. And generally, everybody plans for the long term on the basis of what they're experiencing in the short term. So if you're currently in a financial crisis, it's really bloody hard to plan for future prosperity. You just, you can't really do it because your head can't get out of what you're dealing with now. And I think my vision of how we're going in the world generally is we're beginning to become more easily able to see positive possibilities for the long term, reaching for them. One part of what will drive us there is a sort of a confrontation with our own short-termism, which will eventually produce more of these quickening experiences. But in my view, anyone who reports to me a quickening and says, oh, it seems to me like everything's happening so fast in my life, it's like, well, the other indication I get is when somebody says to me, everywhere to where I look, I see 11, 11, 11. I keep seeing 11, 11. I look at my watch and it's 11, 11. And obviously we've got one of those coming up as well later this year. If you drop off a 2-0 on the last 11. To me, that's an indication of a sensitivity. It's the indication of a little petal of consciousness opening somewhere inside the head or the heart that says, oh, I'm recognizing more about incredible synchronicities in the universe. I'm seeing them happening unfold around me. And so to me, when people report those syndromes, they're signs that they're growing, that you're evolving as an individual, that you're becoming wiser and more aware. That's the closest I'd come to a, will that do, or do you need more? I think it is a collective experience. I think things don't last as long as they used to. I don't mean built-in obsolescence, but, recessions won't last as long as they used to. Wars don't last as long as they used to. Things that people once went through in generations, they can go through much quicker. And the world's having to recognize that. Oh, do you remember this thing? What was it? The latest, the greatest, this year's iPhone. To be not mistaken with last year's latest, greatest must-have iPhone and the one they'll be bringing out at Christmas. There's this feeling of we're all having to run as fast as we can up the escalator that's going the other way or whatever it is. And yes, that's part of what's happening. But you said the words, what's laid out for us. And actually, okay, try this. It's going to sound a bit sort of posy, really, but if the future is drawn in, it's a drawing in pencil. Like when we do comics and they lay it out first in pencil, and then the inker in comes in and they put the ink over it. And a good inker in can go a long way from the pencil drawing. And they have that power right up to the moment where they lay the ink to say, well, I know I drew it this way first of all, or it's supposed to go like that. But now I feel like Rolf Harris, and I've got the wire up my trouser leg. It's supposed to be like that, and then you go, no, actually I won't. I'll go like that with it. And that's the choice that we have. And that's why being a bit overly aware of what's laid out for us is potentially very limiting. It means the inking in process follows the path of least resistance, and generally we don't use our imaginations enough, any of us. We daren't engage them. It's also partly, I blame television. All them blooming dramas being played out, all that stuff. You don't have to use your own imagination because all these very imaginative people have presented with all this stuff to make your imagination run along their tracks and channels. So we don't do it. But when imagination is sort of steered down a particular route, it tends to stay there. And so I don't really want to be too, I would simply like to say what I foresee laid out for us is more opportunity than the human race has ever had before to use its own imagination, to follow its own inspiration, and to create its own destiny. That's what's exciting. Or at least it's exciting as long as you've got faith in humanity. it would be, you know, if you haven't got faith in humanity, if you think that generally, fundamentally, we're all rotten to the core, then God help us if we create our own destiny. But I rather think that's what we've been doing. And if you look back over the history of the human race, there's really very little in there to be proud of. You know, there's an odd pyramid or two. I think we can go, didn't they do well, you know. Nice bit of work, Stonehenge. Well done up at Cainer and the Isle of Lewis, you know. There's some amazing. I went to see the Nazca. They were pretty impressive in Peru. You know, there are some bits and bobs that have stood the test of time, and it's like, well done, everyone. You know, but generally, when you think back over the war, the deprivation, the hatred, the bigotry, the religious obsession, the repression, the suppression, the general selfish and ugly, evil, ignorant history of the human race, you know, one thing's for certain: we can't do any worse. And we might just be about to do a whole load better. How are we doing for time? And does anyone want to ask another question? Oh, that's a keen question. Go on, Em. Do you want to take the mic?
Hello, Jonathan.
Hello.
I'm just wondering whether I've just joined the talk now, just wondering whether you've actually spoken today about the comet or the brown dwarf star called Elenin.
You missed that. Now you'll never know. We manifested it. We did a group manifestation. We all held hands, and we got it really clearly. Just, it's funny though, isn't it? You know, because like, if you turn up at a concert, you know, and you come to see the band, and you say, "Have you played that number yet?" You know, I've played the Elenin number. Yeah, we did. We've kind of covered it, and I have to put my hand up and say I honestly don't know enough. Videoed it. It's clear enough to be videoed. And well, this is the first time I've ever been caught on the hop.
It's also on NASA's program as well.
Yes.
So it actually has a plotted trajectory and comes into very close alignment on September 11th, funnily enough, of this year.
Comes into close alignment with what?
Where it comes in between somewhere around 40 million miles of Earth between us and the Sun. And that's according to NASA's actual program.
And is it visible?
At the moment, people have been videoing it, coming up over the horizon and going down at sunset.
Do you know, I consider myself first on. Okay, I'll go check it out. I can tell you what it will mean, because they all mean the same thing. You know, all comets mean only one thing, which is the end of a regime, basically. That's what they're about. Comets are traditionally harbingers of the ends of regimes and the ends of rulership. So the end, you know, wherever there is a, you know, that's why kings quaking. Well, there's the old famous story, isn't there, about wasn't it Halley's comet that appeared at the Battle of in 1066, the Battle of Hastings, and that plus the fact that old Harold was not knackered from having done his other fight up in York, meant that by the time he got there, you know, William whooped him. But you know, you can. Again, you got your so there's your tedious explanation that Harold was knackered, and there's your cosmic explanation. There was a comet, and it boded better for William than it did for Harold. And generally, comets bring the end of regimes and the end of either kings and queens or the empires that they that they sit over. So it's the end of an empire, or. Yeah.
It would, from everything that I know about astrology, or astronomy, then this would have a much bigger effect than a comet.
If it was a brown dwarf star.
So it's a collapsed star, like our sun. So somewhere in between our sun and a black hole.
Yeah.
Something with an extremely large mass. We've had, since we've been at this festival, we've had 3 M-class solar flares.
Yeah.
And that's been
Right. Well, now we're talking about something a little different. We're talking about about the effect of solar flares and solar activity, and that's not quite the same as the comet.
If this is an interplay between the brown dwarf star, our planet, and the sun, especially going through the solar maximum of about 2012, then this section of elements could be causing volcanic activities. We also had another two volcanoes blow, one in Mexico and one in Hawaii.
Okay. Look. First of all, I'm very, very hesitant to attribute volcanic activity on Earth to, we're now into the realms of physical astronomy. That's a bit of a different realm, and I'm out of my depth on that one. So I can only come at this from the take that I have. And that really would be, which I'm not, which by the way isn't to say that there isn't a relationship. And there is this whole business of Pluto. Oh, sorry, yeah, okay. Let me tie up with something I was saying before, then I'll come back to this, to how I perceive this Elenin thing. But basically, I talked about Pluto, and Pluto representing fear, and then I went off on a tangent. I didn't really cover it. We talked about Mickey Mouse, and I talked about plutonium, and us living under the shadow of fear of the end of the world of one kind or another. Pluto's journey has very interestingly taken it through. There's a different zodiac signs that symbolize the different kind of fears that we've had as Pluto's moved through the different zodiac signs. So that when Pluto was in Scorpio, it coincided with AIDS and the sudden emergence of the great terror being of a plague that would wipe us all out. When Pluto was in Sagittarius, which is very much a sign of religion, then the biggest great fear across the whole planet was, well, it coincided with September 11, with the power of religious fanaticism. And now Pluto's in Capricorn. And Capricorn is very much about the power of the earth. It's about the power of the mountains, and it's about the power of the earth on which we live, and it represents both the terror associated with accelerated global warming, and it associates too with the idea that, you know, seismic activity could go rampant, and it feeds into that fear, and inevitably you can't have a good fear unless there's some kind of basis to build it on. So part of that fear, at least, is that stuff has to happen a bit more so we can all get worked up. But the deal with Pluto, interestingly, there's this strange symbiotic relationship between astrology and astronomy, which means that take astronomers' leads, even if we don't like Brian Cox. And when an astronomer says, look, this planet actually isn't so significant anymore, we have to listen to them. Pluto is about fear. Interestingly enough, it's been demoted. It's not a planet anymore, symbolically. What does that tell us about all the fears we've got? I think it tells us we don't have to pay them so much blooming attention. We don't have to be so worried. Now, back to what I suppose what I would have to say about Elenin and about the idea of this advancing comet that might be a brown dwarf and might be all sorts of things would just be, all right, if the sun is an intelligent being, as Greg Sams is about to explain in his talk round the corner in the Portal for the Immortal, if it is playing out a journey of consciousness with allegedly the most high consciousness beings on planet Earth, which would either be the dolphins or us. I think it's, you know, yes, the dolphins win hands bloody down. All right, so it's nothing to do with us, is it? But if we had aspirations to try and catch the dolphins up, then maybe, I don't know, I mean, the sun must be incredibly patient. It's been around for God knows how many billions of years, and it's planning to stick around for a long time too. But I tell you what, even if I was the most patient, sentient being in this sector of the universe, I'd be a little bored of waiting for the human race to stop being so up their own arses by now, you know. Like, come on. And it is possible. Maybe it's got a bit of a show to put on. Maybe it's got a bit of a drama to put on, just to hasten us along. But I just need to be really clear that no matter what we might be, you know, when you start going, oh, you know, look, peak oil, and we'll all start turning into savages, you know, the Earth will shift off its balance and we'll all be frozen and, you know, we'll be dying. This will kill us, that will kill us, there'll be none of us left. My immediate response to all of that is, well, then there wouldn't be any fun anymore. No, you know, that would be the easy option. If there was a malefic force in the universe, it would want to keep us here so we could carry on suffering. So either it's a malefic force that isn't going to get rid of us all because then it's got nobody left to torture, or it's a benefic force that wants to inspire us and fill us full of love and just chase us along a little bit in our journey towards evolution and awareness. And either way, whatever this comet turns out to be and how visible it turns out to be, its ultimate impact will be to increase the amount of respect that we have for nature and the universe, and then hopefully, although never inevitably with the human race, but hopefully the amount of awe and respect we have for each other. It's to be hoped for anyway. Another question, anyone? And again, how are we for time? Are we all right? No one's winding me. Okay, well, then we're probably edging towards maybe one or two more questions, I would have thought. I can see one over there and one over there. Where's the microphone? Should we go there first?
There's so many questions, and I just want to. I feel it's all about. It's got to be a balance and a cleaning, like a channel opening, so that we can be able to communicate clearly with each other, and be able to hear what's going on. And be able to express ourselves more freely. And for me, it's this about the imagination, what we can imagine will happen, and allowing it to unfold. So, in a way, this control and non-control, like, because if we can imagine this future and how we imagine this shift to be happening. Can we imagine that it's gently uncurling like a flower, or do we imagine that and we step into the next dimension? And what can we do about this? And what is the sacrifice as well? This life, death sacrifice. That death is that the only thing that we are scared of? And are we already perhaps dead now? And it's just a coming to life, perhaps more. That's the waking up, or something like that. That's so. Where is the question in this? That's it. That's it. Are we going to just be rid of the questions? Do you think perhaps this is it? The questions will all go because we're tired of going. Is this it? Is this it? Is this it? Is this it? And maybe that's going to be it. No more questions.
I've got to ask, what sign are you?
What sign?
Yeah.
I'm Pisces sun and
Oh,
Aries
bless
moon.
How wondrously Piscean. That is the best part. That is Piscean question of the decade. If not of my entire career. Thank you. Only, I mean, we all have those questions, but only a Piscean could express them. Could go for such a great breadth in the one.
Try and fit them all into this short span of questioning time.
I think the answer is. I haven't got a clue. And that is the answer. I haven't got a clue. You haven't got a clue. None of us have got a clue. Isn't it great that we don't have a clue? How bloody wonderful is that?
Yes.
And what I think might well be coming for us is a time when we embrace the joy of not having a clue. I mean, in a way, up until now, if you didn't have a clue that there was somebody, if they didn't have a tie, there was another uniform even more powerful and authoritative than the tie, the dog collar. And the man in the dog collar could tell you what to think, you know, and like, nobody can tell you anymore. Mysteries are wonderful things, and the earth is full of them, and life is full of them, and mysteries are sweet. Mysteries are wonderful. They're like, oh, the last thing you want when you find a mystery is to clear it up. What you want to do is savor it and relish it and be baffled by it, and, you know, to enjoy and drink in the marvel of a paradox, because where the fun of it is. And, you know, science is a cheap shot, particularly when our pet scientist has lost. But, you know, I understand that science has a job and a duty to stamp out mysteries with the great heavy boot of logic and research and all that good stuff. But our job is to keep the mysteries coming, and to keep reveling in them, and to keep questioning every time anybody ever says the answer is this, and that's the solution, and that's the explanation, and yeah, you know, is it all a dream within a dream within a dream? Don't know, never will know, but what fun it is just like enjoying it anyway. You know, we're not going to know, but it's wonderful. And that, I think, is the freedom not to have answers, the freedom not to take pre-packaged, pre-digested answers that other people have pulled together and swallow them whole like, you know, panaceas. That's a wonderful freedom, and that's part of our process of growth. You know, because actually you can't grow when you're trying to hold your thoughts and your feelings into some kind of heavy steel cage of how things are supposed to be. Does that help? Oh, good.
Yes.
I said one more, but for the gentleman here at the back here with his hand up and he's desperate, so that'll be you, and then we'll come to the other person in a moment. Can we get you the microphone? Can we get the microphone over to you?
Is it on? Okay, very good. All of this seems kind of speculative and in the clouds and kind of fairy stuff to me. When you have real disasters going on, especially with the worst ecological disaster that has come to the planet in recorded history, which is the 4 nuclear reactors in Japan still spewing radiation after 2 months. We're actually now breathing radioactive iodine, cesium, xenon, and other exotic isotopes right at this moment from those reactors. I haven't heard anybody talk about it throughout the whole festival. You know, with all the sensitivity that's festival, nobody's talking about a real disaster, not something that may be between here and the sun that may happen, that may be there, that may be seen, may not be seen, may come at some date. I'm talking about right exactly now that we're breathing. And since we were talking about Pluto, since the reactor 3 was a MOX reactor, which was not just uranium, but plutonium, which sat on top of that reactor, the one that went into a mushroom cloud, 100,000 spent fuel rods that were particleized and put into the jet stream, and 1 particle of plutonium, since we were talking about Pluto a little bit ago, 1 particle will kill you dead as a hammer within 2 months. So what does Pluto or astrology have to say about a real ecological disaster and something that could kill folks very readily over the next few months, since they're saying that they can't turn this thing off? It's already China syndrome. In other words, it burnt the bottom out of the reactor. It's been in none of the papers. And I just wanted to know about something that's real and actually happening, rather than something that is probably as important as the last end of the world, 2 weeks ago.
Sure. Yeah, good question. Ah, you're Pisces too. Okay. Yeah, that's the other side of Pisces. The 2 fish. Okay. I'm.
into alignment with Elenin on March 11th
Mhm.
when Fukushima disaster happened?
We may have come into alignment with Elenin, but that's not. You know, it's not the trigger. That's not the trigger. The trigger is, as with so much of this stuff, that, you know, on the one hand, there is a, you know, I mean, I've made light of it, and I've been trying, you know, I'm trying to be positive about it, but of course, you know, when I say there has to be more volcanoes, there has to be more seismic activity, you know, you can't feed a good fear without an event or a development that gives you a reason to feel fearful. You know, otherwise it blows away in the wind. There has to be something to attach it to. There is some very interesting stuff about, you know, the whole Japanese collective karma that has given them this very powerful relationship with, you know, with the whole deal, you know, with everything. I mean, already the national Japanese psyche is very influenced by what happened at the end of the Second World War, and you know, that's the other thing. It's often forgotten that we are one planet. We touched on that earlier. You know, and it's one of the things that, in a way, this disaster does, when you point out that what happened there is absolutely, potentially, in our air right now. We're on one planet. We breathe one air. We share one resource. And we are effectively one. Well, we are one nation. We are one family. You know, and what do I think about that? I think it's, you know, it's really hard when there's a war or when there's a disaster, when people are losing their lives in horrific quantities and in dreadful ways. It sounds really glib and awful to say, but by and large it's going to be okay. So no, it's not okay if you're experiencing something that's absolutely taking you right to the edge, and there are a different set of rules come into that, and a different way of astrological working comes into that. And it's difficult because here I'm generalizing and I'm speaking about most of us. You know, yeah, if I'm right there and I'm facing something that's exploding in my face, then my journey is going to be a little different to your journey right at that point. But generally, for us collectively, the journey goes like this. Well, either we're going to inhale those particles and we will all be dead within a couple of months, because if they're coming big time for all of us, or somehow, by the divine intervention of a little bit of serendipity that's going an awful long way, we ain't. And my prognosis is that what's important about the Japanese disaster is that it is forcing the world to look again and look hard at its reliance on nuclear energy as a credible, sustainable source. And so alternative energy sources are suddenly much higher in the consciousness than they've ever been before, and that ultimately has to be seen as a plus. And I suppose it's also true that we generally are having to be more aware of the impact that we have on each other wherever we are on this planet, and on the decisions that we make. And at the end of the day, you know, the earthquake was what it was, the tsunami was what it was, but the decision to place those nuclear plants right there was the result of people in positions of power making choices which were kind of weird. You know, why the heck did they do that? And you might well ask, why are we still building nuclear power stations right here in this country? You know, it's a short-termism, a kind of, hey, well, with a bit of luck it'll be okay. Well, there is a lot of luck, and most of it will be okay, but that doesn't mean that when we get a wake-up call, we shouldn't wake up and do something about it. And I do foresee a long and a clear future for the rest of the planet, and it's a planet in which our evolving consciousness brings us to make more informed and more aware decisions about what we do with our technology and what we do with our lives and what we do with our relationships with each other. And in answer to one other thing that you mentioned earlier, I foresee that being slow. I'd love to say kaboom, but I really don't think so. Not on December 21 next year, not on Harold Camping's October 21, not on any date. The the growth has to be organic. It can be fast, but it has to be sustainable. Growth in consciousness. Otherwise, you've got the same growth in consciousness you have when you take a tab of LSD. You know, it is amazing. You do see everything. You get a conversation with God thrown in the... Well, you're doing the doses we used to take in the old days. I think kids these days don't get any of that. They only take a tenth of a bloody tablet. But, you know, you get all that, but it's not sustainable. It's absolutely not sustainable. You can't hold that consciousness. It blows your mind. So we have to evolve as quickly as we can, but as sustainably as we can, and we will, collectively. What was that? A psilocybin instead, yeah. Okay, got it, yeah. We've got a psilocybin rate, not a lysergic rate. And on that note, I think I'm going to let it... Okay, you wanted to do one more question? Okay. It's got to be quick because they're telling us we're running out of time.
Just to mention the Japanese thing being linked to Uranus going into Aries on the same day. Does that sort of thing interest you anymore? Like the proof of astrology or...
Yeah, the fact that Uranus hit Aries on that day was for me much more of a trigger, and thank you for that. Yes, you know, just because I would work with my conventional indicators, which isn't to say you're wrong when you say that the Elenin thing, you know, happened too, but there are different... Look, we all have different methods of divination, you know, and some of us cut up the entrails of a goat, and some of us read the sky one way, and some of us read it another way. I'm used to reading it according to my traditional methodology, in which comets only have just the one meaning, and they wouldn't connect. But you could argue that if a comet means the end of an era, or the end of an empire, and if there's a nuclear era and a nuclear empire, then you could argue that maybe that is the end of the empire that we're seeing, and maybe that potentially is the most wondrously hopeful thing, because we certainly could do with accelerating our journey towards alternative fuel resources. Oh, it's a bit of a sober note to finish on, but I think I'm going to let it go on that one. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming.